failures outlining Biden's top 5 repeated lies, which are that they planned for all contingencies. About 100 American citizens were left in the country after August 30, 2021. That the Doha agreement from under Trump tied President Biden's hands and forced this unconditional withdrawal. That al-Qaeda was gone from Afghanistan. And the withdrawal was supported by our allies and advised by senior military advisors. Joining us now is Congressman who published this report, Michael McCaul, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And, sir, it's good to have you on tonight. Let's start with the lie that Biden had planned for all contingencies. How do we know that that is a lie?
Because there was no plan at all. Yeah. And that's why it was such a disaster, a fiasco. I was in the classified space with the intelligence community telling us about the conditions on the ground, our top military experts. The White House didn't listen to them. And they had this more rosy scenario that everything's going to be fine. You know, helicopters were never going to go off the top of the embassy like we saw in Vietnam. Right. And yet, Rob, that's exactly what we saw happen. They disregarded the warnings. It happened faster than they thought. And so the images you're looking at right now of HK Airport literally trying to grab onto the airplane as it takes off. We had to rely on the Taliban to provide perimeter security at the airport. The Taliban had offered us Kabul to American forces and our NATO allies to have a more effective, efficient, evacuation. The White House turned that down, and ultimately, Rob, that led to the suicide bomber getting past Taliban checkpoints and killing, 13 servicemen and women. And 15, injuring 50 others. This was a huge disaster. And every one of those misrepresentations, he misled the American people. I think you're right. He outright lied about it. They criticized me today in a report, and it's all about blaming Trump. Yeah. This was all Trump's fault, not their fault.
And it was such a spectacle of incompetence for a brand new administration. It was just horrific to watch. He blames the Doha agreement, claimed this was a forced withdrawal. Your position might vary on mine. I don't necessarily think that pulling out of Afghanistan was the wrong move. I know a lot of Republicans think we still should be there, but that's not the point. The point is withdraw or don't withdraw. But if you do withdraw, if you do pull out, you didn't have to do it in this idiotic fashion that we did it. There was a way to get out of there and have far less collateral damage.
Well, that's right. I mean, look, we can debate the policy of occupation of countries, which I don't think we should. That country's been occupied since Alexander the Great to the Soviet Union. However, it's the way they did it, and disregarding, our intelligence services on the ground that know far better, and our military that had the expertise. We left 100,000 Afghan partners behind that our veterans worked with, our military. We promised them we would protect them and that no one would be left behind. And yet that's exactly what happened. And now they're at the mercy of the Taliban, being beaten, being tortured, and beheaded because of this one man's action. I think blood's on his hands. Not to mention 3,000 Afghanistan special forces fleeing into Iran, of all places, because they had nowhere else to go, I think compromising our national security. Finally, Ralph, if I could just say, it was a turning point in American foreign policy because our adversaries became emboldened. Yeah. They saw weakness. People like Putin decided to invade Ukraine. People like President Xi in Communist China are now looking at Taiwan because they know America is no longer strong. Like under Donald Trump, they're now projecting weakness.
And it shows how naive. What it did more than anything is it's an indication of the same kind of things we see with the way that they want to deal with Iran. I mean, they do not understand what these people are capable of. They don't understand. I mean, they understand nothing. They are so. There's no better word than just naive with how they handle the rest of the world, and it leads to this staggering incompetence.
They're so naive. I remember Condoleezza Rice said, "Look, you want everybody to like you. They're not all going to like you. If they don't, you want them to respect you. If they don't respect you, you want them to fear you." Yeah. One thing I know Donald Trump could do is instill fear in our enemies, and they would think twice before they did things like this. And, when he says things like al-Qaeda is gone, and, when they criticized me today, the administration, they said there are only a handful of al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan. That's just an outright lie. There are hundreds of them, far more than before 9/11. And how about that Zawahiri strike? Guess who he's staying with? Mr. Haqqani, right. One of the most wanted terrorists in the world, Haqqani Network, who now under the Taliban is basically their minister of security. Yeah. And then they deny they even knew about it, saying what we did was a violation of international law. I think naivete is a great way to describe this administration.
Yeah, it's comedic that the top guy for the Taliban is basically living with one of the top guys from Al-Qaeda. Or it's just, and they act like they don't know. It's like you couldn't make it any more blatantly obvious. The administration claimed 100 citizens were left in the country after August 30, 2021. Your report found 800 Americans left behind when the last U.S. military aircraft departed on August 31. White House also saying women and girls made up 43% of Afghans brought to the United States. Your report finds only 25% of those who did make it out were women and girls. The most vulnerable people, women and girls, only 25%. And we brought in 75% men. The people that could be the agents for change in that country, the people that can fight in that country, are pulled out. The women and the girls are left behind.
Rob, that's the saddest story in this whole deal. These little girls and women who have never lived under Sharia law. Now they have to do the full-blown burqa. They can't go to school and be educated. I remember in these final days, it was like Schindler's List, they call it. If you're on the list, you get out. If you don't get on the list, you're going to die. 4 busloads of girls from the music art school in Kabul trying to get them to one of the gates where we could get them out of there. And you know what? We were successful. But there are many others who did not make it and now have to live under this, under this fear every day. And you're right. I'll stick by my numbers because mine are right. 800 American citizens are still behind enemy lines with the Taliban, and only 25% of the women and girls escaped that country. Shame on this administration for what they did.
Imagine living relative normality for 20 years as a young girl or a young woman, and then you go into this. I mean, it's horrifying.
Tragic.
It is horrifying. Congressman, thank you so much for bringing all this to light and for the report and for explaining it so well. We do appreciate it.
Hey, Rob, thanks for having me. Thanks for covering the story.
Of course.